guess who's coming back with like a big passion project director that you might not have expected to hear from again?
I don't know. Who?
Francis Ford Coppola.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's putting together the financing for this big project called Megalopolis.
Okay.
Which is being pitched as like his version of the Fritz Lang Metropolis film from the 30s.
Oh my God.
Classic sci-fi. So it'll be like this, massive opus with like, dozens of main characters and spanning like 4 hours or something. It's going to be this gigantic thing. And he'll get the money for it too because he's Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah, it's going to be super pretentious, isn't it?
It could be. I don't know. I mean, I thought, he's one of your favorite filmmakers of all time. I would have thought you'd be excited about this.
Is he?
Yeah, I mean, you listed The Godfather as one of your favorite films, right?
Yeah, it doesn't mean I think he's like my favorite director, though. I don't think he's in my top 5, actually, so...
Okay, fine. But anyway, it's nice to see him come back with something big because he's been kind of languishing in sort of pretentious art house hell for a little while. There was the last like credited feature that he did was something called Twixt, which was like a film
a bad cereal.
Yeah, I think bad cereal. It was like some sort of film that he was re-editing for every screening. So he had shot a bunch of footage, but he was putting it together in different orders for every screening that he did at various festivals. Just like super pretentious. Like the only thing that where you end up when you've made The Godfather and Apocalypse Now and The Conversation, and you're like, what else could I do?
I do love me The Godfather, but it's not really him that I loved about the films.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Welcome to the 7th episode of the Kinetoscope Extra Buttery Podcast of 2019. My name is Jason Chen. I'm going to be your host. I'm joined by my co-host, Robert Snow.
Hey.
And we've got a pretty packed episode for you guys. We're going to run through Shazam, which debuted over the weekend. We're going to talk about a Department of Justice warning to Hollywood about the Oscars and exclusionary practices. We're going to touch on Joaquin Phoenix's new film, The Joker. We're going to talk about Bill Murray's newest zombie film, The Dead Don't Die. And then we're going to talk about all these IPs and sequels that Hollywood has lined up for us, including Alien and Planet of the Apes films. And we're also going to just tease a little bit more about HELLBOY, which both Rob and I are excited for. So without further ado, how's it going, Rob?
Pretty good. How about you?
Good.
So the first thing on the list is Shazam.
Yes.
That's crazy, right?
What are your superpowers?
Superpowers, dude? I don't even know how to pee in this thing.
This is proof of authenticity. Super strength. Electricity manipulation. Hyperspeed.
I'd like to purchase some of your finest beer, please.
The new DC film. This movie it's kind of like, what is it, like the 4th or the 5th in the current lineup of DC extended universe movies. That this is coming on the heels of Aquaman, but we're dealing with a movie that is a lot more kind of sectioned off from the rest of the narrative. Like it doesn't really link up narratively with Aquaman or Wonder Woman or any of the others. It's kind of its own thing.
Exactly. So Shazam is part of who's previously known as Captain Marvel, by the way.
Yeah, but that got messy, like some sort of copyright dispute back in the day between DC and Marvel, which I only partially understand. But yeah, basically Marvel has got the rights to the character now known as Captain Marvel, who was very recently put on the big screen and for her first outing. So yeah, this character is now known as Shazam, which is an acronym standing for the names of various Greek and Roman gods. And he's got basically like your standard rundown of powers, but the difference is that he is basically a 14-year-old kid who says the name Shazam and then turns into a full-size adult superhero. So we haven't really had a superhero movie quite following that concept so far. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities for comedy and for a bit of a different take on the superhero genre.
Yeah, so I think superhero films tend to have this tendency to oscillate between one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
So when Zack Snyder started on this DCEU stuff, we got some really dark films. So Batman v Superman and Justice League were kind of this washed out gray, totally like the world is going to end type superhero movie.
Yep.
But the last couple we've had, including Aquaman and now Shazam, they've really lightened up the tone, kind of like what Marvel did when they first started to kind of differentiate themselves. Mm-hmm. But now Marvel's kind of going towards the serious end because they're wrapping up their big sort of dramatic arc. And DC's just kind of coming up with their new slate of superhero movies after the debacle that was Batfleck and Henry Cavill as Superman.
Right, exactly. So it is kind of interesting to be at that kind of transition point between what Marvel is doing, and then which isn't to say that like Marvel is making like a concerted effort to go super dark from now on,
right?
But they are at that point in their arc where they're kind of concluding a really big, epic piece of the narrative, and yeah, but DC has kind of woken up a little bit and realized that, you know, as much money as the Zack Snyder movies did make at the box office, the fans and the general critical appraisal of them was not very positive. And it feels like the thing that people really want from superhero movies is a pretty even balance between poppy, colorful cinematography, jokes, and...
Well, something that just doesn't take itself too seriously. You go to these superhero films to kind of escape. So I think anytime, you know, any of these characters starts to brood or, you know, complain about their powers, people are just like, I'd love to be in your position, so can you please stop bitching and go catch the bad guy?
Yeah, and that's what this movie really, takes and runs with is the concept of like, what if a 14-year-old kid got superpowers? And it kind of it riffs on a little bit of the stuff that Max Landis touched on in his indie movie Chronicle back in 2014. You know, the imagine a 14-year-old kid gets superpowers. Probably the first thing they're going to do is mess around and play practical jokes and exploit the superpowers for profit, which is exactly what Billy Batson, the main character of Shazam, gets into at first. We see him go to a convenience store and buy beer before he's of legal age. We see him like do pose for selfies in the Rocky Steps in Philadelphia, stuff like that, you know. But gradually he kind of has to realize that the old Spider-Man adage of "with great power comes great responsibility" applies, and he's got to kind of man up and use his powers for good.
I kind of like the villain in this one. I know Mark Strong is like pretty much good in anything he does.
Oh, yeah.
But in this movie, he's got like the 7 deadly sins, and they've kind of manifested themselves as like monsters. They look kind of like giant clay monsters.
Gargoyles or something.
Yeah. And so there's this part where Mark Strong confronts his, douchebag older brother and father, and basically gets his revenge. And there's one scene where like he defenestrates his brother.
Yep.
And that was like the biggest shock to me. But he turned out to be, even though a bit of a cartoony villain, he turned out to be like one that feels like he could be a real threat. True.
Yeah. I mean, the movie doesn't spend a whole lot of time talking about what Mark Strong's characters really after, other than some broad like global domination kind of thing, that you don't really get as much of a chance to sort of sympathize with him in the way that you might with like Killmonger from Black Panther, for example, who was...
You don't think so?
I don't know. I mean, I could sympathize with the how Mark Strong's character, what's he called? Dr. Thaddeus Sylvana or something?
Yes.
I can sympathize with how Sylvana is like, he grew up in a really nasty relationship with his father and his brother, and he felt like nothing he ever did was good enough. And that motivation made a lot of sense. I think that's a very relatable motivation.
Yeah.
But in terms of what, if you think about other great villains from superhero movies like Killmonger, the Killmonger's goal moving forward, he had a goal in mind that was pretty well defined. It actually convinced some viewers that he was right. There was this thing on Twitter for a while of like, Killmonger was right. So we don't get quite as well defined of a idea of what Sylvana is after in Shazam, even though the early part of his characterization makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that, in that his sort of end goal is kind of nebulous. He just wants a lot of power.
Yeah.
But I think he comes as a fully realized character in that you understood why he is, and why his relationships are the way they are.
Yeah, in terms of like the other characters in the movie, you know, Billy Batson, the guy who transforms into Shazam, he's a foster kid, so he's had a long run of moving around between various homes. You know, he was abandoned as a child, and he, as the movie begins, he finds himself matched with a new family, a new foster family, with a bunch of other kids and these two, and they, you know, the movie presents them as being kind of like the absolutely ideal foster family. They're very caring and involved in each other's lives, very supportive, and
very multicultural.
Very multicultural. You know, you've got the little black girl who loves to talk and loves to hug, and then you've got the kind of heavy set Latino kid who doesn't talk very much, but you know, has kind of like an inner strength to him. And then you've got the kid Freddie, who becomes Billy's, like, you know, brother. He's his foster brother, but they have more of like a best friends at school kind of relationship, and it's with Freddy that Billy starts exploring the powers that are granted to him as Shazam, and there's these great montages where they make videos about testing the various powers and then posting them on YouTube, which then kind of builds up a reputation for Shazam around Philly, and that's probably some of the best stuff in the movie, I would say. That kind of like youthful kind of discovery of what kind of powers are involved here, what they're dealing with.
Yeah, the whole growing of age sort of like fish out of pond stuff is always funny. I just think overall, though, like, this is a really enjoyable and good film. I think DC's sort of on an upswing now. I know Aquaman wasn't a very well received movie, but I do know there are a lot of people who enjoyed it.
Oh, well, I mean, I would say Aquaman maybe wasn't well received by critics, but it had a huge fan base and it made a crap ton of money. So
yeah, exactly. So this is really an interesting move by DC, and I think they really hit something here by going into sort of the deeper pool of characters that people don't know about, because I wasn't that familiar with Shazam. Mm-hmm. So when the whole sort of lore and the whole final scene happened where all the foster family kids team up, that was all really new to me and kind of surprising. So I appreciated that. So I wonder if, you know, that DC would probably move away from Batman and Superman for at least a little while longer. It does make me a little more hopeful for Suicide Squad and Birds of Prey, but I'm still a little skeptical about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, after, you know, some of the movies that we've been forced to sit through recently, anyone would be skeptical, I think. But yeah, if they keep on with this tone that they've established with Aquaman and now Shazam, like, they could be looking at a couple of hits if everything goes the way it should, and if the filmmakers are kind of hit that kind of magic balance of creative freedom and also like, yeah, whatever DC is doing with Warner Brothers to kind of like guide the movies in a particular direction. Although it seems that, and we were talking about this last episode, it seems like what DC is kind of identifying itself as now is the studio that is not as concerned with building up some sort of continuity or canon. You know, they're kind of opening the doors to filmmakers who want to do spin-off movies that are just one-offs and see what happens.
But I mean, we're gonna get multiple Shazam movies, right? So
for sure, yeah. And they do link things up with the main continuity at the end of Shazam. You know, spoiler alert. You know, oh no, watch out. But you do get one quick little sort of cameo, like maybe like a 3/4 cameo from Superman, because they obviously didn't want to bring Cavill in and actually show his face for some reason. I guess he was too expensive for that one shot.
It would have been so much better if he was there for that one shot.
Yeah, I don't know what. I guess maybe he was busy or something, or too expensive. But so you see Superman from basically like the neck down, and it is like the Superman costume that we know from the current run of movies. So it just makes it clear that everything that was happening in Shazam is in that same part of the universe as Batman and Wonder Woman and all of that, and it opens the door for Zachary Levi's Shazam to pop up in some Justice League movie in the future if they get that far.
Oh yeah, like the Batarang that Freddy has as a souvenir actually like becomes a bit of a plot point at one point.
Yeah,
but yeah, oh man, I was really hoping Henry Cavill would show his face. And if he wasn't available, I would have settled for Gal Gadot or even Batfleck to just come in and just cameo. Like, it would have been so much better. And Freddy's reaction was perfect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, surely, even if none of them, like maybe like Ezra Miller as the Flash.
Yeah, so Shazam's got like the superhero mix, a bit of Superbad sprinkled in there.
Teeny bit, yeah.
Yeah, teeny bit. It's got some nice dramatic moments. The action, I thought, at the end, even though it was a bit of a CGI fest, I thought it worked. I thought it was okay.
Yeah, I mean, the character design and the effects for the 7 Deadly Sins were... they were all right. I mean, I at times they felt like they could have used a bit more work on the technical side, but I'm not going to dock too many points for that. The one thing that I really appreciated was how they worked it into the script where Shazam comments that the deadly sin known as lust should be way hotter, and that was something that like I was thinking about through the whole thing. I'm like, if there's a deadly sin known as lust, like we're not seeing a lot of lust going on here, because clearly this is a PG-13 movie. There's only so much they can get away with, but I'm glad that they called that out. You know, there's a lot of self-awareness in this movie, which I always appreciate.
Speaking of self-aware, the movie industry, or I guess the Oscars actually, have come under attack from a bit of real life politics.
Oh yeah, so this is the DOJ kind of warning or comment to the Oscars. Basically, that word reached the Department of Justice in Washington that there was some suggestion of a rule change at the Oscars to prevent streaming services like Netflix and Amazon from being eligible for Oscars. And so the DOJ kind of sent a letter to the Academy and said, hey, look, if you do this, it's basically amounts to an antitrust situation where you're denying a company eligibility in a competition that, while directly speaking, there's no financial consequence to winning an Oscar, but it does make a difference for anything that you do as a company afterwards, because the brand name of Oscar does carry a certain amount of financial clout when you're putting together marketing for movies or selling other stuff. So, you know, an Oscar winning company can, you know, be more competitive. So yeah, they essentially said like, hey, don't do this because this is kind of violating capitalist principles. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how much you've read into this, but the DOJ's comments on this issue, they're a little bit out of date, because essentially the issue that they're talking about was resolved about a week or two ago. I think we might have even mentioned it here on the show. The worries over whether or not the Oscars were going to change the rules and disqualify companies like Netflix were based on comments that had allegedly been made by Steven Spielberg, because he was allegedly planning to go to a Board of Governors meeting at the Academy and propose this rule change, but then it was revealed that Spielberg said nothing of the sort, and that it was based on some fake news report that had been generated, some rumor that had gotten blown up into a real story.
I have already lost track of like where and how this story started, because it's so convoluted, even though it's such a simple thing.
Yeah.
I just think it's hilarious that the Department of Justice had to step in and actually make comment about this. And I think this shows you how disruptive a lot of streaming companies and a lot of new media companies like Netflix can be.
For sure, yeah.
And because they're sort of upending this traditional movie system and business, I think it's actually really smart that the government came out and said, look, guys, like, we're all for healthy competition and all, but you guys can't start making rules excluding other people from playing in the game, because it's basically what would be the proper term, anti-business, anti-competition.
It's something that Netflix has sort of danced with in the past, because they've come up against the rulemaking organization at the Cannes Film Festival about this. You know, there's been a lot of arguments and even I think some legal affairs with regard to whether or not Netflix movies can be shown in competition at Cannes. But I think because of the rules in France being very different than they are in the United States when it comes to theater exhibitions, it's, I think the Cannes Film Festival can get away with it because they're a different sort of festival, and they have a little bit more flexibility when it comes to banning a particular type of company for one reason or another.
Because I think Cannes is more like a festival, whereas the Department of Justice letter was more about the industry as a whole, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that might be the big difference there. But it's interesting to see how this will pan out, because I wonder if the Oscars will either open their doors more to like non-traditional film distributors, or will it be more exclusive in saying that, okay, we will only consider films that have X or Y. And I wonder if like Netflix and all the other streaming companies would one day be like, well, okay, screw you guys. Well, we're going to have our own awards.
Yeah.
And we're only going to, only films that were made by streaming services will be allowed to be considered for awards.
Yeah, I mean, there's already a tradition for that with like video creators on platforms like YouTube and Vimeo and those sorts of things. Award shows like the Streamies or the Webbies and stuff like that. Obviously, none of those awards competitions have anywhere near the kind of mainstream clout when it comes to televised shows and stuff the way the Oscars do. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't fault Netflix or Amazon from wanting to pitch something like that if they felt they were getting frozen out.
Moving on to more other news would be the new Joker movie. The teaser trailer just dropped with Joaquin Phoenix.
My mother always tells me to smile and put on a happy face. She told me I had a purpose to bring laughter and joy to the world.
In the last episode, rather, we were talking about it, and the trailer hadn't dropped at that point, but now it has. And I don't know. I mean, I've been steadily changing my view on this for the past like 6 months or so. When the news about, a Todd Phillips directed movie featuring the Joker, played by Joaquin Phoenix, produced by Martin Scorsese, like all of these pieces, they did not sound like they fit together. But the more I've thought about it and the more I've watched what DC is doing with these kind of spin-off ideas and one-offs, the more it makes sense to me. And I feel like this trailer kind of confirms what I've been feeling recently, that this is something that makes a lot of sense for the superhero genre.
Right. So I don't think I've changed much of my position. I was kind of cautiously optimistic to begin with because Joaquin Phoenix is like a phenomenal actor. And if you watch the trailer, like, did you notice how much of a body change he's undergone? Like, having filmed
You Were Never Really Here.
And he had bulked up for that role to play an aging
enforcer, hitman, yeah.
Exactly. In this one, he's kind of like deformed, sort of distorted. It seems really dark. I feel like I don't know if this was a type of like torture porn movie, but the teaser trailer did show Joaquin Phoenix getting beat up a lot.
This makes sense given Martin Scorsese's involvement. There's a lot of callbacks to Taxi Driver.
Well, De Niro's in it, so.
Yeah, and then there's the King of Comedy thing. I've never seen King of Comedy. I've heard various things about it over the years, but King of Comedy follows a sort of a failing stand-up comedian played by De Niro, and Scorsese directed it. And it's interesting to see De Niro here in what's being described as kind of like a what if scenario. What if the character that De Niro played in King of Comedy actually became successful after a while and rose up and became the host of a popular late night show. And so we see there's some suggestion in the trailer about how the character played by Joaquin Phoenix will be a kind of Rupert Pupkin King of Comedy style character who's failing as a stand-up, and then something happens that kind of pushes him into madness.
Yeah, so one of the Joker origin stories from the Batman films is that he gets beaten up. He somehow gets sort of tied up with the mob. He owes him a bunch of money, he gets beat up, and he sort of starts getting his will and spirit sort of chipped away, and he kind of descends in this state of madness that eventually turns him to the Joker as we know it.
So that's the arc from The Killing Joke.
Yeah, and a lot of other Joker arcs kind of follow a similar pattern. We did see a young Bruce Wayne in the trailer too.
Did we? I didn't catch that.
So the kid he sees through the fence where he has his like fingers in his mouth and he's trying to make him smile.
Oh.
That young kid is supposedly playing Bruce Wayne.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
Yeah, so that's your sort of Batman tie. And there's a shot of, I think, a hospital that's labeled as Arkham or something like that.
Yeah, you definitely see that. Yeah, there's a wide shot.
So it definitely fits in that universe. It is definitely separate from the Shazam universe we just talked about.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
But yeah, I am so intrigued by Joaquin Phoenix's performance. I'm still cautiously optimistic, but I'm very, very happy that no plot details were revealed. And I hope, and I know this won't be the case, is that this teaser trailer would be the only promo we get before the film is released.
Yeah.
But we'll get a lot more details. But it looks like, Joaquin Phoenix is gunning for another Best Actor nomination here because he really goes full method.
I mean, not to say that the Academy would pay it much attention because, as we know, they don't, other than the recent surge in favor of Black Panther, they don't really pay much attention to the superhero genre if they can help it.
Well, Heath Ledger won it, so
true, yeah,
for the same character.
There's a bit of a precedent. You're right, yeah,
exactly, yeah. So, and this is definitely a bit more of a dramatic film, and definitely not the classic superhero special powers, like coming of age story.
The only other thing that kind of caught my attention with regard to this is actually, not to speak too ill of the social justice warriors out there online, because a few of them are doing good work and keeping them honest. There is already kind of a whisper campaign that's kind of appeared on Twitter. Certain people who are trying to kind of float really bad takes about how the Joker movie is going to become like an apology for incel culture.
I have not heard about this. Please go on.
It is so stupid.
Get it.
It is so stupid. It's basically just somebody looking at the Joker trailer, seeing a character who is like sidelined emotionally and ends up becoming like a crazy serial killer as a result of being like denied something in society, which is like a very basic character sketch. There's not a lot to go on there, but they're taking that and assuming that the Joker movie is somehow endorsing the behavior of somebody who's cast away from society or turned down in a romantic relationship and therefore becomes a crazy killer as a result, saying that, the movie is behind this or apologizing for it. And it is just a stunningly bad take. I mean, it gets back to something that irritates me a lot about how there's a certain category of people out there who have a really hard time with critical thought, and they I could go on a tear about this if I wanted to, but essentially people who they look at a movie that's depicting some sort of bad behavior and assuming that the movie is endorsing that behavior. It was something that popped up with regard to Zero Dark 30 back in the day. People assuming that because the characters in that movie torture accused terrorists to get information about Osama bin Laden, that the movie is saying that yes, torture is okay. But no, what's really happening is in movies of any kind, any genre, if bad behavior is depicted, they're saying that these characters went to these lengths because of X, Y, and Z. They're not saying that this is all right. We stand by this behavior. And it feels like people are already kind of building up this kind of like anti-Joker movie thing based around incel culture, because we've had so many examples of like incels, even here in Toronto, a guy who kind of identified as an incel mowed down a bunch of people with a van, which was terrible. But the connection between that kind of real life behavior and something being depicted in a movie, I don't buy it for a second.
I'm in agreement with you there. I don't think films inherently say anything political. I think it's open to a lot of interpretation. I don't think a lot of films mean to make a political statement about anything that they really depict, unless you're Paul Verhoeven and you make like a film that is clearly satire. That's when I think that it becomes a legitimate piece of social criticism.
Yeah, I mean, if you come right out and either implicitly or explicitly, or like an Oliver Stone, for example, and you say, I am making this movie about this topic, and it's clear that this is what I'm saying. But I think there's a lot of people out there who are trying to sound smart by reading into certain movies past the point that the text of the movie actually supports, in an effort to make a point. And, it was a problem with the reaction to the Last Jedi stuff. It was a problem. It's it comes in waves, I feel, with certain pop culture moments where it's almost like the people who are engaging in this behavior are kind of bandwagoning on the popularity of a particular piece of pop culture in an effort to kind of talk a bunch about something online and look smart. I don't know.
Do you find it difficult to drown out this kind of noise?
Occasionally. I mean, I always have to tell myself that it's a very vocal minority of people who are carrying on like this, but it does get irritating from time to time, because you're like, you see enough of this stuff in your feed and you're like, come on, like the movies can be analyzed in a more subtle fashion than what these people are carrying on with.
I've always been sort of intrigued by the movies that these people sort of use to sort of be the hill that they die on.
Yeah.
Because I think there are a lot of shows out there, say, Game of Thrones, for example, that really make overt political statements about how we govern ourselves and how we run our daily lives.
Yeah.
But that's a whole topic for another time.
Yeah,
it's only 2 weeks away, by the way, too, eh?
Yeah, so I still haven't decided how I'm going to actually access the episodes, but I know I'm not going to be spending $40 on a Crave upgrade just for Game of Thrones. It's not worth it.
You just, do that thing that rhymes with Borant and starts with a T. I think at one point the showrunners were like, it doesn't really bother me that much because part of the reason why it's so popular is because the piracy is so rampant.
Yeah. I mean, HBO as a company is not happy about it, but
of course,
maybe they should do better deals with with telecoms like Bell and allow for wider access.
Okay, well, here's an interesting exercise. So say you could just buy the Game of Thrones season 8 just by itself. It's like a one-time thing. How much would you pay for it?
If I could buy it so that I got all the episodes at the same time as they aired, basically,
or as one go, it doesn't matter. Just like, what would you pay to have access to see that season?
I would say probably $50 or $60.
50 or 60. Okay, so I was thinking $100 is probably like the max people would be willing to spend.
Yeah.
Because you think about 8 episodes, they're about like $10 each, $12 each. It sounds about right. So it's interesting. I hope in the future that instead of having to just buy a stream, I hope we can just go online and kind of like online shop to buy the things that we want.
Sure. I mean, that would be the ultimate kind of customer experience. But I think there was a tweet a little while ago that said, I think I like retweeted it or favored it or something, because the person was essentially commenting, it's fascinating to watch companies like Netflix and Amazon slowly invent cable for the second time.
Yes, exactly. It's no different.
Yeah, it's this bundling that's happening, or these efforts to kind of compel you to sign up for a whole bunch of services to get access to all these exclusive shows that you can only get on X, Y, and Z. At the end of the day, you're still paying what you were paying for when cable was popular, and
which is why I don't think pay-per-view is actually going to die out, because that's what essentially YouTube does, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, and even YouTube is in the game to an extent. I mean, they're trying to encourage you to sign up for their premium subscriber experience.
I thought they trashed that.
No, that's still going. That's a YouTube Red or YouTube Premium or something they're calling it.
What? I thought they gave up on that.
They renamed it, but no, it's still a thing because they have because they just had a whole season renewal for the Cobra Kai Karate Kid spinoff show.
Oh, I've been meaning to watch that.
Yeah, so they and that's gotten like good reviews too. So it's actually got a bit of a critical acclaim going for it. So yeah, they're in the business. They don't have nearly the selection in terms of exclusives that Netflix and Amazon do, but I think YouTube, like any other Silicon Valley media company, wants a piece of that pie.
Yeah, I wish there's just like one universal site called like movies.com or whatever, and that has like every single movie you could ever imagine, and you could just pay per view that thing, like pay a certain price for a certain thing.
Yeah, but nobody's gonna make any money doing that.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's just my dream. That's why I said it's my dream.
You can be the Elon Musk of this movies.com idea. And,
oh yeah, I'll just have to like run a company that loses billions of dollars for like 10 years, grab a whole bunch of market share, and then hope I can sort of monetize it. Meanwhile, becoming like a supervillain in the process.
Exactly. Yeah. Moon bases, space lasers, the whole 9 yards.
If I was a supervillain, I don't think a moon base would be the first thing I'd go after. I'd kind of be like in Shazam, where they're talking about finding a layer and having a layer. That's what I would probably have. I'd probably have like some like super high tech mansion rather than something buried or like some underground thing where there's no natural sunlight,
Yeah, because you have to promote this like exterior layer of respectability so that people keep investing in your companies.
Exactly. It's like the X Mansion is basically like a giant mansion, and it's not like really a layer until you go downstairs. But anyway, speaking of more releases and movies and debuts and more stuff coming out, we have Bill Murray's new zombie movie, which you were a big fan of.
Well, I mean, I saw the trailer and I was like, yeah, this is for me.
What was it, wild animals?
So what are you thinking? I'm thinking zombies.
What?
You know, the undead. Ghouls.
The Dead Don't Die.
Yeah, The Dead Don't Die. This is a new movie from Jim Jarmusch, who I don't know how many of our listeners are familiar with his stuff, but he's been like the indie movie provocateur for a while. It's actually not the first genre movie that Jarmusch has made. Like, you know, he's made a career for decades in making lots of like small black and white, very talky movies that only like snobby film buffs go to see. And then all of a sudden he made this movie a few years back called Only Lovers Left Alive. And it had Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston as a pair of vampires who've been around for hundreds of years and were living in Detroit. And it was just kind of a very straightforward kind of quasi-dark comedy with a bit of like a romance thing thrown in and not a whole lot of plot, but just very enjoyable, great music, a fun riff on the vampire concept. And it feels like this new movie is the same thing, but for zombies. So it basically follows a zombie outbreak in a small town in America. And Bill Murray pops up as a local sheriff or sheriff's deputy or something like that. And Adam Driver's there. Tilda Swinton is back. A lot of the Jim Jarmusch performers and a few new folks who, as far as I know, haven't worked with Jarmusch before. And it's just one of these dry kind of riffs on the zombie genre that I feel like is my favorite way of watching zombie movies, because I can't get really, personally, I can't get super into the kind of straight up zombie genre as it is.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a big zombie person, so any zombie movie I watch has to be a comedy. It can't be a horror, because I don't know. I either don't enjoy it or I just don't buy it. The only zombie sort of movie that zombie thriller that I enjoyed that I can think of is actually 28 Days Later, and that was more of a different kind of zombie movie, I think.
Yeah.
But there's also more. Alien and Planet of the Apes. This stuff doesn't end, Rob.
No, I mean, there's just always more stuff to watch, man. It's
well, just not even more stuff to watch. It's like more stuff that they want to mine and just like milk. Like, I thought the Planet of the Apes and sort of like kind of came to a really good conclusion. Like, it ended, it set up everything else.
Oh yeah,
I can see the case for Alien, because I think Ridley Scott has sort of opened a can of worms with his past two films, I guess.
Well, and he's also said that, you know, personally as a filmmaker, he's going to keep making movies until he drops dead on set one day. So, you know, if half of those...
Kudos to him.
Yeah, totally. And if half of those movies that he's going to keep making until he dies are Alien movies, then I guess, you know, keeps the whole franchise alive. You know, your mileage may vary with the Alien movies in their current format. You know, I was kind of like lukewarm on both Prometheus and Alien Covenant.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Because I'm not a huge diehard for Alien in general, but I do really like the Planet of the Apes movies, the past trilogy, and it makes sense that, like, if you look at the last three movies as kind of like one arc, there's potential there for them to start up a new arc with more movies. And I'm sure that now that Disney owns Fox, they're looking for any number of IPs that are coming in from Fox's stable,
right? And
just looking for the ones that are the most viable.
So since we're in like the golden age of IP, I was thinking, Rob, is there a past IP or a new IP that you would like to see be adapted into film or have a sequel?
Ooh, well, I mean, if money's no object, then I guess it would be great to see another Man from U.N.C.L.E. movie, because the first one was great.
Okay, so yeah, that's the one we both default to.
Not the first one that would probably get made. It seems unlikely that they'll get the financing together on that. I'm trying to think of like dormant franchises that we haven't heard from in a while.
The one I was thinking of the other day is, do you remember Inspector Gadget?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I kind of wish that made a comeback.
Really? I mean, like, I feel like they've made a couple of like TV spin-offs recently.
Have they? I only remember the Matthew Broderick movie.
No, apparently, I can't remember how I came across this information, but I'm pretty sure one of the kids' channels has had like a CG animated Inspector Gadget for a few years.
Oh, okay. I'm talking like live action, big screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I can see I can see them doing that. I don't know who has the rights to Inspector Gadget right now.
Oh, I don't know, but they've had a movie done before, and I feel like that's sort of an IP that they can, look into and mine a little bit too.
Here's one that has never been adapted before, but might be a strong contender, especially in the age of like graphic novels being huge source material. It's a graphic novel series called Bone by Jeff Smith. And it's kind of like a fantasy inspired thing where these kind of like cutesy characters called bone creatures who have like evolved into this fairly modern society. They get run out of town because one of the Bones runs a very unpopular political campaign, and they get lost in the desert, and they find themselves in this valley that's basically deep in like the medieval technology, like Middle Ages kind of thing, and get drawn into this big epic quest to kind of save the valley and defeat this supernatural evil force, and it kind of goes from there. But I've read the whole series. I actually own the paperbacks, part of my small graphic novel collection, and it's always felt to me like a really strong contender for some sort of a series on a streaming platform, or maybe even a movie series. There's been some talk of adapting it in the past, but that would be an IP that no one's really pursued in a big way, that could probably make a lot of money if it was done the right way.
And the other IP that you kind of have your eye on is HELLBOY. That's coming out. And David Harbour, he just joined the new Black Widow production.
David Harbour's star is rising pretty quickly in Hollywood. I mean, most people these days probably still know him just as Hop on Stranger Things, but yeah, the guy's been working basically like a blue-collar worker in Hollywood for years, like long-term runs on Law & Order and supporting characters in all kinds of big movies. I feel like I've probably seen him in like 10 or 12 movies just in like small roles. And, but yeah, here he is kind of fronting his first superhero movie franchise where he's kind of definitively the lead, and I really hope it does well and they make more of them. I mean, I'm a huge fan of HELLBOY in general, and like I've talked about it before on the show. So we'll see what this release in a week's time nets them in terms of box office, because there's so many ways to take that franchise, and even like spin-off characters. Like it's its own thing on the scale of like a Marvel type of thing in terms of interconnected stories. So if it finds an audience, I'd definitely be there for it.
All right, so we're looking very excitedly ahead to the next couple weeks. Guess I think that's about it. Is there anything else?
No, well, I was just going to point out that like in the next episode, we'll probably have watched Endgame by that point. So we'll dedicate a chunk of that episode to that. And stay tuned for some news about some new platforms that the podcast is going to be available on. If you've been listening to this show on either Apple or Google Play, we are investigating getting the show up on Spotify as well. So once that is up and rolling, and we've confirmed that all the episodes are available, we'll definitely let you know here on the podcast, and probably tweet it out from the Kinetoscope Twitter as well. I've also been made aware that apparently the word kinetoscope is hard to spell. A few people have told me this.
Where do you guys go to school? Come on.
I don't know. It's a KINETO scope, SCOPE. Yeah. Not hard.
Who said that? Let's go beat them up.
People I work with. I can't beat them up. I need my job, but I don't know.
Well, do it anonymously. I didn't say bring a baseball bat to the office. Just, pounce on them in the parking lot when it's dark out.
Learn to spell. Also, visit kinetoscope.ca.
Yeah, exactly. So email us, kinetoscopereviews@gmail.com. Visit our website, kinetoscope.ca. Coming to you from Vancouver, my name is Jason Chen.
And coming to you from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.